Today, the Black Lives Matter movement hits big tech.
Then a look at the small town protests across America.
And New York reopens. Do you have summer plans?
I'm Alexa Scordato, and this is Future Forward.
I am Steven Rosenbaum. Let us launch. Hey, Alexa.
Hey, Steve. How's it going?
You know, it's the weirdness continues. It's a pretty weird day, all in all. By the way,
it's beautiful out in New York.
I'm putting up behind us the live tracker of COVID-19 cases around the world. We'll put this in the show notes for those of you who are interested. It's a live YouTube channel that's kind of a little bit of a brisk reminder of what's going on out in the world.
Basically says that you see a lot of cases in South America, right? That's sort of one of the new epicenters, right?
Yeah. But USA is still number one, so yay.
Oh my goodness.
It's like, yeah. And then also, just because we are live, I wanted to share another live feed that I found. This is a live helicopter out of LA right now. These are demonstrations going on throughout Southern California from NBC LA. And we will check back in with this from time to time. But we have 3 chapters in today's show. So maybe we should just kind of talk about the chapters and then we can get into it. So chapter 1 is companies responding to BLM. Really interesting, different reactions. Number 2 is small town protests. And then chapter 3, the summer ahead and what is in store. So with that, we will we'll begin. So let's start with, so you found these amazing company stories. I did not know about many of them. So you lead. Let's start with LinkedIn, which I knew nothing about.
Yeah, so I was following these stories because at work we made a choice to put up a site-wide banner that said Black Lives Matter. We sort of issued an official statement from our CEO. And I just noticed that there were so many different approaches to this. Some brands were sort of getting criticized for not speaking out. And at the same time, there were brands that were issuing creative and content, and they were also sort of being judged as sort of being performative or some sort of flavor of like slacktivism. Anyway, I pulled this collection of links because I thought it was interesting how some of the big tech companies were handling the conversation internally. And so you could see this LinkedIn all hands was deemed a dumpster fire by employees because just was not well moderated. They took a series of questions, and basically Black staff said that they were made to feel incredibly uncomfortable. Basically, they were asked to share what their experiences were, and then the responses of white staffers sort of just made them feel like diminished, made them feel like there was racism at the company, and that they were poorly equipped, and that their leadership was poorly equipped to respond to this moment and address sort of the systemic racism that was even present, in their own company.
I think it's really tricky is too simple a word. I can only tell you two minor stories. We had a conversation at NYC Media Lab about what to do, and we went round and round, and even among a small staff, there was, I don't want to say significant disagreement, but different points of view. It wasn't like everyone went, yes, let's do that. And in the end, we ended up putting up a social media message that was, I think, pretty clear and decisive, but not rambling. And that was it. That was all we did. Mm-hmm. And I just think if you had 100 employees or 500 or 1,000, or I think you'd find there's almost no right answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think their Ben & Jerry's was sort of touted as being one. I can pull that link up. But yeah, I think there are 2 conversations. There's the internal conversation in terms of staff, employees, and there's sort of the external message that companies are putting out. And so I think a lot of companies have chosen to sort of say, do we have our house in order? What is the conversation like with our employees. And so in LinkedIn's case, that obviously didn't didn't turn out great. You can see in the New York Times. I don't know, Steve, did you read the op-ed that was issued?
I did.
And what was your reaction to that as a non-New York Times staffer but reader?
But I mostly think the Times covering both COVID and BLM is pretty brilliant. This was clearly not.
Yeah.
It was poorly handled at the outset. I mean, the manager who runs the op-ed page said he didn't read it. So I don't know, I mean, again, I'm not inside there, but my immediate reaction was, so as the low-level staffer who got this submission, you greenlit it, didn't fact check it, and didn't flag it to management as, hey, this is controversial enough. We also, a bunch of people like it and the Times kind of flip-flopped a little bit. They started by supporting diversity of voices and then kind of read it again. I went, yeah, maybe not. And their staff was the team of writers and reporters extremely pissed off.
I mean, they put their jobs on the line, because when this op-ed ran, I saw several tweets from New York Times staffers saying that the op-ed piece put Black lives in danger.
Yep.
It was a very pointed statement. It was issued by multiple staffers. It was retweeted. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think that, the thing is, now that nobody has any memory of anything, it's a reasonable question about whether or not this is a non-issue on Monday morning, because so many other things will come along. I don't know. I think some people's careers definitely were impacted by this at the Times, for sure.
We'll see. I mean, I think this is one of those issues that's sort of coming to the surface now in a way where I think individuals are just deciding, enough is enough. I cannot be silent. Companies cannot be silent. We have to hold leaders accountable. So the New York Times staffers basically spoke up. And then we saw another example of this again at Facebook. I think Facebook employees for the longest time have probably questioned the decisions made by Mark Zuckerberg and his team. But last week they actually staged a virtual walkout. So everyone is at home. I think they've said that they're not going to actually have employees come back to offices for the rest of the year. And so employees took it upon themselves to stage sort of this collective protest. And that's in response to Facebook not taking a stance against the president and the remarks that he's made against protesters.
So my friend Matthew Simon Ryan Cavaletto, or Matthew Cavaletto, made a comment on Facebook, and I'll just read it. I think it's probably relevant. He said, there might not be one right answer, but there are certainly definitely a bunch of wrong answers. Which so let's just let's jump right into our fine President Trump, who decided this was the time to kind of reignite the NFL debate. Explain to me how that was a good idea, and why he just seems determined to be on the wrong side of history on this.
I don't think there's any rhyme, reason, or strategy behind anything he says. I think he's just emotional. He gets emotionally hijacked, and then he just takes to Twitter. And so I just don't think he's that strategic. I think he just says what he feels, and that's it.
So I have to say, my bad, but I had forgotten, so many controversies since then. I had forgotten about Trump's position on the NFL, take a knee matter, and Colin Kaepernick, and how kind of wrong he was then. And not that I'm not collecting all of the wrong things he's done, because I am, but I that one hadn't.
That's too hard to track, Steve.
Yeah, but then he comes and reminds me, and for the NFL to come out and say we were wrong, not insignificant for the NFL to say we were wrong.
Yeah, so it was interesting because there was a video. I'm not sure if you clicked on the link in the article, but a bunch of NFL players, Black NFL players, put together this video compilation basically saying that Black Lives Matter. We want the NFL to take a stance and to acknowledge that systemic racism and oppression is real. Yeah, and so then you had the Commissioner Goodell put out an apology. What I actually think was a mistake or a misstep was just actually not apologizing directly to Kaepernick. I feel like they owe him an apology, and that was not.
Screw that. They owe him a job, for fuck's sake.
Totally. I mean, it's just and I think that's
I'm sure he likes being a spokesperson and all, but I bet he'd rather be playing football.
Totally. So I mean, this is where I think people are really being the most critical of companies and the statements that they're issuing. It's one thing for the NFL to say we're sorry. It's another for them to show it. Or for any organization that has a platform, any leaders that have privilege and wealth, I think what activists, protesters are all basically saying is put your money where your mouth is, and that actions speak louder than words. If you really feel that Black Lives Matter, show us. I just don't know who's capable of rising to the occasion, right? You look at LinkedIn, clearly they don't have the leadership in place from a D&I standpoint to even facilitate town halls effectively. You have staffers at Facebook and the Times who are questioning leadership and their decisions. You have the NFL. I mean, this is not going to be like a light switch where all of a sudden, poof, racism is gone in America, right? I think what's happening now is we can no longer like brush it under the rug. Like everyone is going to have really hard conversations, and leaders, whether they like it or not, will be confronted either by their own staff or the public.
Or their families.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, for example, if your wife happened to be Serena Williams.
Oh, you're talking about Alexis Ohanian and Reddit.
Indeed, I am.
So he was another one who sort of came out and said that he's resigning from the board of Reddit and is encouraging the board to replace him with a Black candidate.
So I have all kinds of feelings about this, but I'm going to start with the one that just comes to mind when you say those words, which is, in what universe did resigning become the brave thing to do? Like, it would be different if he said, here's the person I want to take my board seat.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, somebody with significant stature in the Black community and against racism and hate speech. And, for example, he could give the board seat to his wife.
Yeah. I mean, it gets into this conversation.
I just think he's a coward. And I think, I think, just to be clear, here's the underlying issue I have. He owns a significant portion of that company. He's not giving his stock to anybody. So he's still going to be able to vote his shares, and he's still going to be able to essentially have the same, board members don't have some uber magic powers. There's a board meeting. They listen to the reports. The reports generally are about numbers. They talk about, but like, they don't run the company.
Right. So you think the better move would be to say, I think we need to, I'm going to help institute change from within. And rather than relinquish sort of a seat, we need to make space for additional voices at the table, and then to basically find that candidate and facilitate the transition.
So I think his problem is the exact same problem as Twitter's problem. So when you were an American tobacco company and you were making cigarettes, like, you could have as many board meetings and as many policies and as many theoretical conversations, but the end of the day is you knew what you were making and you knew its health effect on Americans. I don't think there's any way that either Twitter or Reddit get fixed with better AI or better policy. Mm-hmm. I think that so Ohanian and I have had this argument. We've had it publicly. So, I've got skin in the game on this. And his whole thesis, which is pseudonymity, and people should be able to publish anything, and they should be able to speak freely and talk about controversial things, has brought us, QAnon and Pizzagate and R the Donald, and just an unmitigated slew of horrible stuff. And if you go to Reddit, yesterday, which I did, was down all day. You go again today, the most, not the most popular, to be fair, but in the top 100, there are two toggles on the top of the page: safe for work and not safe for work. And if you're brave enough to click on not safe for work, I will only tell you, it is, every manner of, not even counting the white power stuff and the hate speech stuff, but them, listening to Reddit talk about, well, our community standards and clean and this, and we're trying to, the basic core of that platform and Twitter are fueled by objectionable conversations.
Yeah.
And then I'll be done with my rant, my little mini rant here, which obviously I needed to get off my chest. But on top of that, this idea that it's a free speech argument, I think is fictitious nonsense. And the question that I'm going to ask in a post tomorrow is, the largest owner of Reddit remains Condé Nast and the Newhouse family. And, when they sit down and have board meetings about revenue and projections and advertising, does anybody say, by the way, what percentage of our traffic is porn and hate speech? Or does that not come up?
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, it's, I think what you're hitting on there is like, they're, having talked to a lot of friends over the last week about, what the ask is, right? I think one theme that sort of emerged is that tech can no longer sort of take this neutral stance and be apolitical, and that it actually has to be opinionated. That platforms have to decide, are we going to be explicitly anti-racism, anti-hate, anti-false news? And so that feels like the conversation of the moment, which is, are leaders at these companies going to lead? Because the stance that they've taken to date has sort of been this hand wavy, like, well, it's user generated content. We're just the facilitators. We're the platform. And I think we're realizing is that that's no longer good enough.
No, it's strangely enough, we've talked about this before. This comes down to the whole Section 230 debate that's on the horizon, and the fact that strangely it's the one place where the Republicans and Democrats agree, although I think they agree for different reasons. Anyway, enough of this. Let's do two things. Let's go back to the tracker so that we can see if we missed any news. So here's the tracker. So this is a live feed from NBC LA, which at the moment seems more like a weather bucolic photo op. Yeah, weather report. Yeah. But meanwhile, just so we don't forget, here's the live COVID-19 tracker, also on YouTube. And it's hard to not spend a moment. Let's jump into the local protests, because I think that's a story that's not getting the attention it deserves, and I think you rightly pointed out it's pretty important.
Yeah, so my family is in New York. My parents are in Long Island. I live near downtown Brooklyn, and just based off of the media coverage earlier in the week, it was easy for my parents to think I was in some type of war zone. Like, I felt like a lot of the initial media coverage was showing the violence, was showing the looting and the riots. And, what I had witnessed firsthand is that a lot of the protesting was incredibly peaceful. And so what I've really been in search of the whole week is sort of all of these beautiful moments that are occurring all across America. And so I want to just spend a few moments just highlighting the fact that small town America is participating. It is not just the large cities like New York LA, San Francisco, Boston. But really, it's happening everywhere, including places that are predominantly white. And I think that's a really important important part of what's happening right now.
The news media increasingly is driven by video images,
Mm-hmm.
and the video images, it's impossible. For example, if you shot my neighborhood on the Upper West Side, you'd be sending a feed to the master control room of CNN of essentially nothing happening. And CNN would be saying, on the Upper West Side, nothing's happening, not a story. So the cameras are always looking for the most. And if you've watched the news in the last day and a half, there's been a concerted effort on the part of the news to tell the stories of peaceful protests. I think they realized, oops, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we actually amplified, certainly violence, certainly police violence, certainly some protesters, certainly broken windows, and terrible stories. But the question is, if there's is that the news headline? And so, here's a photograph from Paducah, Kentucky. And here's another one from State College, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And here's another one from.
Protests are, one or two people. It's not hundreds or thousands of protesters, but I think it's worth calling out that there's I think I was watching the Obama town hall. I don't know if you caught that during the week.
I did.
But, he said at one point, it's easy to think that we're back in the 1960s, again, like sending people into space and protests and riots in America. He said, but if you look at who is coming out to protest and who is participating and who is engaging in this conversation, it is so much more diverse than anything that we've seen. And that's really powerful.
Yeah, I also think there's a question about what the next week brings, and then what this uprising morphs into. And it's interesting. There's all this conversation about abolish the police, and that can sound very far left. If you don't pay attention to the underlying message, it can sound really kooky. And then I was listening to, I think, NPR yesterday, and they did an interview with someone who said, think about this. Many of the calls that police get and respond to are for some kind of either domestic violence situation or emotionally, or a potential issue with someone who's got emotional issues. And they arrive untrained for that, or poorly trained, and wearing a firearm.
Yeah.
So if you disassemble the, abolish the police message, what it really is saying is, maybe it's time to rethink that when someone calls and says, I need help, my wife or I, or we're fighting, or my child, or there's an emotional issue, maybe there's another entirely different role that you send that's more like a social worker, or more like a therapist, or more like someone who's trained in de-escalation than somebody who's trained to, take a taser or a gun out of their hip.
Yeah. I'm forgetting which city it was. It might have been Columbus, or there was a woman who was a police chief, and she actually went into this crowd and completely diffused the situation simply by listening. She did not need to use any force whatsoever. She really just needed to make sure that everyone sort of was being heard and listened to. And I think that, to what you're saying, there are different ways, I think, to resolve conflict. The anti-police or sort of abolish police statement isn't, I think, about saying we believe in anarchy or we don't believe in law and order. I think it's about questioning sort of the overfunded police as police institutions relative to other things.
And also some crazy, like this idea that the military takes its excess hardware and gives it to local police forces. So local police forces now have these armored vehicles, these Like, who thought that was a good idea?
Right.
Like,
and again, when you look at the, I think AOC was sort of saying, like, look at the funding for police, look at that relative to housing and education. And you don't really need to look past just those numbers alone to understand sort of why certain communities are fundamentally broken and suffering.
there was a article the other day, it might have been Atlantic, I'm not now sure, about all of the police agencies that are flooding into Washington to protect the White House. And it rattled off all of the police institutions that have a footprint in DC already. So, for example, who knew that the Smithsonian had its own police force?
I did not know that.
Including a gun range.
What?
Yeah, its own gun range to train its police force.
That's wild. I mean, I guess maybe because to protect things like the Hope Diamond, but still.
So Amtrak has its own police force. The Postal Service has its own police force. There's DC Metro Police. There's the FBI, the Secret Service, the Marshals. It goes on. I mean, it's on and on and on and on. You know, and they're all, you know, different training, different rules, different order. You know, and then on top of that, you got this crazy story, which isn't really in our three themes for today, but worth taking a second to talk about, which is this, whatever Bill Barr is now operating, this unlabeled, unnamed force of people that have no identities and might well be civilians and don't have a badge or a name tag or a, like, and they just, and look kind of like, anyway.
It's wild.
All right.
Speaking of DC, this was my favorite story of the week. Mayor Bowser is my hero. She really mobilized the community to sort of turn DC into a block party after that opportunist, bizarre photo op last week. You know, I don't, if you followed the news, like Trump was he did a press conference in the Rose Garden, and then he was going to walk to a church nearby, and then there were peaceful protesters, and then they were tear gassed so that he could basically walk from the Rose Garden to the church, take a photo. Anyway,
take a photo holding a Bible upside down.
Right.
which, by the way, the Washington Post, in the line that etched into my brain for the week, was holding it like it was a dirty diaper. And one of the reporters said, "Is that your Bible?" And he said, "It's a Bible."
Yeah. So what I love is that Mayor Bowser basically, like, just within 48 hours mobilized the city. They painted Black Lives Matter in front of the plaza where most of the protests have been taking place in permanent street paint, like that yellow paint that's used to mark the yellow lines on the road. So you can get this aerial view of Black Lives Matter. The plaza was renamed Black Lives Matter Plaza. And it sort of created a very like festive and happy, almost street fair like vibe, which was, I thought, really, really awesome.
So is Trump in a bunker?
Who knows? I mean, he's definitely not with the people. That's for sure.
Who's inside the bunker? Let's just play this out for a minute, and then we'll get to the last story, which is, you know, a little. Oh no, we should get to the last two stories because they're both really relevant. We don't have to. Nobody wants to hear more Trump bashing. You can write your own copy for that. Let's do so. Two things just in terms of where we go next. In terms of the summer ahead, there was this really terrific IEEE Spectrum article about wearable track social distance and sick employees in the workplace devices, which I read that and I was like, okay, I get social distancing as a wearable device. I buy that. Like, it just knows your perimeter, and if you get within 6 feet, it goes beep. I like that. I think a beepable perimeter device.
I actually think that is that's a great solution to some of the awkwardness. Like, you know, I've been at grocery lines and I felt people who are just kind of hovering, like just too close. And I have to turn around and sort of say, "Excuse me, sir, excuse me, ma'am, do you mind just taking a few steps back?" That's just a little awkward. I would much rather they get beeped instead of me have to confront them.
All right. So the only thing I don't really know the answer to is if you're wearing a mask and the other person is wearing a mask, does the 6 foot thing still apply?
I think it's just there's a general, I feel like we were sort of given guidance. Wear a mask, stand 6 feet apart. And so until I'm told otherwise, like it's just social courtesy, right? It's just like, are you being mindful of your surroundings? Are you being considerate of your fellow citizen? I don't know.
Look, I think New York, I think it's going to go down in history that what New York did was really hard. And if you listen to Cuomo, one of the things he's like, look, we're Monday, theoretically, we're opening up phase one. And for those of you who are keeping track of phases, phase one means street side retail, curbside retail, certain essential services.
Like
So you'll,
construction.
and construction, yeah. But that's, we'll see. I mean, I think I have a theory that curbside dining, curbside retail, whatever, that makes sense in the moderate weather of May and early June. And then when you get to July and it's 110 degrees outside, curbside gets a whole lot less pleasant really fast. I mean, like, so you show up at, Best Buy to pick up your whatever, your Apple device or whatever you're buying, and you're out there 20 minutes and you're melting, and they're handing out bottles of water, but they won't let you in the air conditioned store. That's going to be another whole chapter. But you can just postpone that story. We'll air that in 3 weeks. So I like the idea of electronic devices for social distancing. I like that. I like that as a potential solution. And then last but not least, let us look at the summer movie season, because it turns out there's some stuff in there I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, so I don't know about you. So I went to college in New York and was a longtime Upper West Sider, and I used to go to the movies, the one on 85th Street and then the Lincoln Center IMAX, as sort of my escape from the heat activity in the summer. And I actually really love summer blockbusters of all shapes and sizes. And so I was just like researching what to expect, because I haven't really done the on-demand movies during COVID. Have you?
No, because there hasn't been anything I was excited about. But I will tell you here. So let's just go through the list, because there's a couple. So so June 5th, this already was released. Shirley, Hulu and VOD and drive-ins. I don't know anything about Shirley. One of the buzziest films emerging from Sundance, Shirley stars Elizabeth Moss as a fictional version of horror writer Shirley Jackson. Haven't heard a word about it. My bad. Should we watch Shirley? We could.
I'm not into like horror or anything, so
yeah, me neither.
Probably not my thing.
All right, so then Da 5 Bloods is June 12th, so it's not out yet. It's on Netflix. Spike Lee's latest group follows a group of Vietnam War veterans played by Deral Lindo and Clark Peters, who returned from Vietnam to present day to hunt for buried gold. Okay, I'd like to see Spike make something fabulous.
Yeah. I mean, I think anything race relations is going to be watched and discussed heavily.
Yeah, so. But let's go to number 3 here, because this is the one I am genuinely excited about.
I saw this trailer. It looks good.
So I have to confess that I'm not much of a fanboy character, but I am a Pete Davidson fanboy. I just think he's just brilliant nuts and on the edge creatively and kind of out there and honest about what's going on in his life. And I find him like infinitely appealing and troubled at the same time. And so The King of Staten Island, I heard an interview with Judd Apatow about the making of it. And I was like, must watch, must watch. That being said, I've only been to Staten Island once, and I'm told I'm not allowed to go back there. So, which is a long story for another day. So this is this is VOD, which means I guess it's going to be it's a paid. I don't know where would I even get it?
So I've seen video on demand available on Amazon.
Yeah.
And I think that's really it. That's where I've seen it.
I have to say my only issue with the trailer is my stomach hurts that they called Marissa Tomei's boyfriend Bill Burr. I'm like, really? Did you have to do that? Like, is that meant to drag me back into the real world? Maybe it is.
Maybe.
All right. Also, June 12th, Artemis Fowl with Colin Farrell.
Mm-hmm.
I on Disney Plus, which I'm still in my trial on, I think.
Yep.
Netflix,
you have a Will Ferrell movie. Oh no, wait, I skipped one. There's the Story of Fire Saga.
Yeah, all right. You know what? We're not going to have time to go through all of these, but let's get to the big ones. So I would say Irresistible with Steve Carell, except that I watched Steve Carell Space Force, which was so jaw-droppingly terrible. Somebody literally ought to have taken it back into the back and shot it in the head. Like someone should have looked at the first season and the first episode and gone, we can't release this. And by the way, I know this because I so desperately wanted a comedy. I was like, please, can we have a comedy, please? And I was excited when it came out and I tuned it in and I was just like, and then I was like, am I just being grumpy? And then I posted on Facebook, is this terrible? And everyone was like, no, it's beyond terrible. And I was like, all right, good. So I'm not just being grumpy. It's really, truly terrible.
Yeah.
And so Irresistible was written by Jon Stewart. Wrote and directed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me nervous.
So what were you most excited about on this list?
Hamilton, July 3rd. Brilliant.
It was supposed to come out in October and they pushed it up, which is awesome.
To the day before 4th of July.
Yep.
Like marketing, whoever the marketing people are that figured out that they had this extraordinary asset and they could like actually own the 4th of July weekend. Big high fives.
I would put a lot of money behind Lin-Manuel Miranda being a driving force behind that decision.
Yeah, that's probably. You mean he picked up the phone and said, "I need this."
He said, "Push it up. People need this content now. This is really important. It's timely. Let's do it." I think he did that.
Yeah, no, he is one of the handful of extraordinarily brilliant both activists and performers and writers and directors of our time. And so, yes, I would say that was probably most certainly him. So again, my Disney Plus trial is still on July 3rd. So hot dogs, hamburgers on the grill, although we don't really have a, what if I could put a grill on my little.
Get your outdoor terrace situation sorted out?
Yes.
Yay.
But yes, we have chairs out there and lights. It's lovely. It's tiny. It's the size of a, refrigerator, but it's, but I don't know that I don't know that grilling out there is an option. I mean, we could go to the park, but we could go to Central Park and find one of those, little grill things. All right. And then also July 3rd, Truth. I don't know anything about this movie.
What's missing in the lineup is we don't really have one of those big, like Michael Bay, or Avenger type blockbusters. But later in the fall, we do have the Widow, with Scarlett Johansson, which is sort of from the Avengers. Oh wait, Wonder Woman. That's probably the biggest one here.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, anyway, this link will be also in the show notes. Come back when we go to our VOD version, and you can take a look at it. This is an article from time.com, and it's the summer movie season. No, wait, that's not right. 20 new movies to watch this summer. What to expect in 2020's rescheduled blockbusters. So, with that, I think to answer your question, Alexa, the summer movie season is damaged but not dead, and may come back in full bloom at some point. With that, I guess I want to end with just one hopeful thought. I really do think, I don't know how it happened, but I do think somehow or another, the Black Lives Matter movement is more than a George Floyd story. It's more than a piece of video. It has a long and important history that is metastasizing or galvanizing or one of those isings into a moment that isn't going to float away. And I think it's about racism, and I think it's about what we are as a country, and I think it's about politics, and I think it's about things that we've allowed to just roll forward. And I'm optimistic, too strong a word. I'm hopeful.
I was an American Studies major at Barnard and spent a lot of time just looking at political movements and activist movements. And I think there's a through line in terms of this narrative. You know, it's part of American history, and it's just another chapter in forward progress. I don't think we're going to eradicate racism, but I think this is another milestone that basically solidifies that, you know, equality is an American value.
I couldn't say it better than that. So see you all next week. Bye-bye.